it's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, and founder of GSD, Get You Done Venture Studios, the premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. A 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company that I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities are not. With that, I have an incredible guest today, Sergio Athanasso. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing his name properly. Sergio is a lawyer. He's been involved in law for quite some time. His law firm focuses exclusively on business and individual immigration services. His approach improves workforce mobility, helps startups, allows clients to understand the immigration process as a whole, and effectively categorizes each individual company to available options. His law firm differs from other firms by working quick as possible for the best outcome, putting clients first, and by communicating directly with others. So with that, I'd like to bring him on board with us. Hi, Sergio. So where are you from originally? Are you from Pittsburgh, or where are you from?
I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania originally, hometown where I'm currently sitting.
Oh, wow. And what about Athanasso? What is that, Greek, or what? Where's that
It's
from?
Greek. It's Greek. My dad's side is from Greece. My mom's side's from Italy. So my mom picked the name. So it's really like Sergio, but everybody says like Sergio or whatever they want. Sergey, I don't know. I just take it.
Now, did you learn Greek or Italian or neither?
It's Spanish.
Oh, there you go.
So because when your parents speak two different languages in the home, they can't speak it to each other. So it's like I picked up on pieces, and then I was like, what do I do in school? Like, what do I study? And they didn't offer Italian. So then I was like, Spanish kind of is like Italian, and then I ended up getting really good at it. So here I am.
Wow, that's amazing. So what about on your dad's side of the family? Is he a first generation Greek that came here? Or?
His parents came, and so did my mom's parents. So I'm pretty Americanized, but I think some of my upbringing, I still have a little bit of that foreign stuff in me.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me a little bit about it. So, you're originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right? You went to law school at Duquesne, if I recall. And, as you're going down through this journey, what made you decide to look at law in this different way in terms of, areas like immigration, waivers, F1 student, people don't get it. There's so many different ways to come into the U.S., right? Like these
Right.
O1 visas,
Right.
extraordinary capabilities, investments. So what options are out there? Let's say a startup, Sergio, comes from Greece, right, and wants to set up in the U.S. What kind of options do they have to be able to get, they want to move to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, or Silicon Valley? What options do they have?
So, it really depends, but typically if it's a startup company, I'd ask first, well, do they have an abroad branch, where this is like we're starting a new office that's foreign owned, and then we can do like a new office intercompany transfer, bring one of their managers over. So I want to know what's the purpose. And then, another thing is, are they a treaty country? There's a E2 visa you can be a treaty national for, and you can be an investor, as long as you're a national of that country, which is great because then you can later bring in employees that share that nationality as well. So, I look into those
How does
options.
it work? So, like, what's a treaty country? Which ones are you talking about?
So there's a whole list. I don't know them all off by heart, but
No, but like, for instance, what countries are treaty? Canada, UK.
Canada's a big one. Poland, a lot of the European countries are, and then they'd invest. So
What
if
does
it's an
it mean,
individual.
though? Like, when it's a treaty country, what's the differentiation between a treaty and a non-treaty country?
It's just the countries that aren't on the list. I don't know where the treaty initiated from. It's based on trade, and stuff like that and relationships. So I don't really know the source, but I just know
So
that they're
you
not on there.
But so they get some additional privileges, right, coming over into the U.S. So if you're a treaty country, you've got some advantages. What about this thing? You look at visas like O1 visas. B1, B2. What's the difference between all these? And, let's say a company's coming from Europe and coming to the US. What kind of visit, what should they be doing to get they want to open up shop in Silicon Valley. What kind of visa do they need in order to stay here? And how do they do
So
it?
it depends. There's a couple things that I ask for first. Like I think that's a good place to start. I say like, what are your goals? What is the nationality of the individual? Do you have an office abroad? What is the job description? What are the qualifications of the person that are coming? These are all questions that I ask. What is the start date? Um, y- all of this is a factor into the analysis of where can I put them. But let's say there's a German company and they want to start a business. Then if it's German owned, then maybe we can consider the E2. Or like I just had an Israeli company want to start a business, but we're gonna have to do an L new office because Israel can't do an E2. They're not a treaty for the E2. So it all depends. It's really tough. Now the B1, B2 is just for visitors. So you can do a business visit, you can attend meetings and things like that, but you can't be on payroll, you can't live here, but you can seek opportunities. So if you wanted to see where you want to put your office, you wanted to meet with people, maybe investors, you can do all of that on a
What's
business.
Sergio, what's the line between doing business in the US and, like, if you're coming over and you set meetings, where's the line between working and setting up meetings and those kind of things? What's the litmus test for that?
That's a good question. So, I typically say that if you're coming for those temporary business meetings that you could do on ESTA, which is like the visa waiver program that a lot of Europeans have, or with your visitor visa, the B1, B2, I say, have a return ticket, don't be put on US payroll, have an itinerary, things like that, where you're really just coming in with a specific purpose and
So as
doing.
long as they're not like on US payroll here, what happens if they get paid in their home country, right? And they're over here having these meetings and things. That's not a problem, right? Or
It
is it?
shouldn't be a problem if it's brief, because I mean, no one is expecting them to not take their salary just because they entered the US to attend a business meeting. But I think that's where you get to that time consideration. It's like a factor test. So, are you in business meetings for 6 months? You know what I mean? Are you maxing out? And at that point, where do you live? Like, where do you actually live? Then that's where the question comes in. And usually, CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, they'll weed that out when you come. They'll say, "What are you doing here?" And if someone says, "Well, business," they may say, well, what kind of business, And that's when I prep people on what to say based on what they're actually going to do. Because sometimes the CBP officers just hear business and they're like, you're on the wrong visa. I'm like, no, that's not true. You can attend a meeting, you can go to a conference, you can hear Gary speak,
Well, I
right?
mean, it's interesting because we don't know what we don't know, right? And you're right with those customs officers. Sometimes they can be pretty darn arbitrary about who comes
Yeah.
in and who doesn't. I know people that got rejected coming in, and it wasn't because
Yeah.
they didn't have a good reason, right? They just got rejected and they had to turn around and go home.
It's tough, like they have discretionary power because they have to use their intuition to an extent. You know what I mean? And suspicion. So they have that. We give them that authority. They're the gatekeepers. That's what I tell my clients. So they're like our soldiers, if you think about it. I know they're just normal people at the airport or wherever they're crossing, but they're supposed to be there to protect, they're border patrol. So if they feel like you're lying or you're not coming for what you're saying you're going to be doing, or you have some kind of record and you may require some waiver, then there could be things that you have to do, and that's why I do prepare people, especially when they're coming in for business. Now, if they say I'm going to Disneyland and I got my ticket and I'm going in for a week, I really don't do preparation for that unless someone really wanted it.
Yeah, no, I got it. And so, what's the best way for a startup coming into the country? What kind of visa would be the best visa for them? They want to open up in the U.S. What kind of visa would be the right one for them to, And here's the other thing. I know they say if you have, company's been established for a year, that's one thing, right? There's certain time frames. How long does a company have to be established in the U.S. before you can start inviting people to come in?
You can start pretty much right off the bat if you can qualify for an E2. So that's why I would go the E2 route, because
What's
it's
an
a strong.
E2?
That's the treaty one for treaty investors and treaty traders. So, it depends on the nature of the business, but if it's solid investment, let's say, let me just think outside, like, let's say Adidas, for example. Let's say that's a German company, at least I think it is. If they were like, I want to create a headquarters in wherever, which they have somewhere in the US, Oregon or Portland, wherever, they could qualify or may have an E2 visa. They can bring their employees on it, but it doesn't have to be a massive company. I have Canadians. Um, it's at least my perception is like everyone's running out of Canada, but that's how I feel because they're all coming to me to come here. But anyways, that will just sell their
Why
house
is
and
that, by the way, Sergio? Why do people want to come?
I you know, mostly it's a better life. I think when it comes to Canada, I think it's the housing market. I think that houses are, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I hear through my clients that it's just like
Um,
it's like way worse than ours. And I think it's a cold place. I
well, I
don't
mean,
think they really,
my friend just got a house in Toronto, a moderate house, and was 3.8 million Canadian.
it's ridiculous, and then people my age, like the millennials that just like really want to buy a house that's it's like completely out of their reach. So, a lot of them, what they'll do is they'll either sell their home or whatever it is, to get their lawful source of funds, and then they'll invest that in a business. And you could buy a franchise, you could start a new business, you can just buy an existing business. So that's a really good way
How
for
much do you
people.
have to spend in order to qualify that for that investment visa? What is the spend number?
It's a great question. The law says a substantial amount, which is not defined. A lot of things in this aren't defined, but
Well, how do you know what substantial is? Like, is it 50 grand, or it depends on kind of
it's
money you have?
You know what? So we 100,000 seems to work. These are startups, but there is a proportionality test. So I do tell people like you're not supposed to spend your money just ridiculously just to throw it in the garbage. There's some things you can do, like maybe pay for your lease for the whole year or whatnot. But I always tell, like I had a marketer that just did a lot of marketing from the computer, low overhead. I said, listen, like if you're at 50,000 or 30,000, let's just try it. And it worked. It worked. It got through. But a substantial amount, there's no number. The regulations don't say it must be this much. So it's hard to say, but 100,000 is usually safe. Usually.
Interesting. And then what about, so the founder comes over to the US. How do they get the rest of their employees over?
So once they register the company, usually this is done at the consulate, they'll register the company, they'll enter. That registration should be good for 5 years. So then the employee can do a smaller application. And the employee won't have to have been abroad, employed by an abroad entity for a year. That would be an L, that'd be an intercompany transfer. So that's the benefit of the E2
Is
is
there
that
any Are there any time limitations or time frames that you have to have your company before you can get those L visas?
for the L, the company has to be operational and there has to be a corporate relationship. I think if it's brand new, like you just opened it abroad, that might make a tougher case, because you have to show that it's doing business. So I would say a reasonable amount of time, but there's no set requirement for how long the foreign company must be there. But there has to be a corporate relationship.
Interesting. And then what's the, people doing those L visas, what's the rejection rate? Any idea? Is it high or low, or, and how long does it take?
Yeah. Okay, so it always changes. The administration can change things like that. I would say it could be anywhere from like 60 to 80%. My rate is higher, but I specialize in those kind of things. So I know what the government is looking for, but it depends too. It really depends. Like, the abroad company has to have the ability to sustain itself if it loses a manager. It's one of the things they'll ask. Like, if you're moving your manager, who's running your business? So there's things like that you can watch out for that'll increase your success rate. But it's not 100%, with the L's. The E's I say are higher, I think, because it is.
What are the E's?
I'd say they're like 90 plus. Now it depends which country you're processing. Like I see denials in Pakistan that are ridiculous, and then it seems like everyone in Toronto gets approved. Now, I don't know if it's because they speak English and it's just like they're just kind of like our neighbors. I really have no clue. I don't know if it's the training of the office.
And the E is the treaty country, right?
Yeah, that's for treaties.
And then what about the B1, B2? What's that?
That's just for visitors. So like anybody coming to visit from any country, to go to New York or wherever it may be, conferences, those are all visitors. Now people from uh, visa waiver program countries, they don't actually need a visa. They just go online, they just do a little application, they can fly the next day. So like Italy or UK, pretty sure UK too. Mostly the European countries can all do that. So
And
they
then,
don't.
so what about this thing with H1 visas? What are those?
H-1 visa, so H-1B, that's for specialty occupations. So it's basically a position that requires a bachelor's degree. So that's a great visa type. The issue is that it's subject to a lottery unless you're cap exempt, which is like a nonprofit, things like that. So, but most companies, private companies, they want an H-1B employee, they have to put them in this lottery, and the odds are like 20 to 30%, and it's every March, and you get the results typically like the first week of April, or if not earlier. And you might only get it's like 20, 30% odds, so that's the thing that's unfortunate about the H-1B. Now the O-1, which you brought up earlier, there's no cap, there's no lottery. So, I usually consider that as a backup, but you have to have extraordinary abilities. So it's not impossible to prove, but you do need to show that that person has some sort of unique ability. So I wouldn't do that for an entry level grad from another country. I'd maybe wait and see. Let's say maybe a company is like, I really want to get this guy. He's really good in technology. Like we have an AI system we're building, and he's got articles about him. Like that guy, I can get an O1. I can get you an O1, but you're American, I'm assuming. I get you an O1, probably no problem. So, a lot of athletes can come in on an O1, stuff like that.
Got it. And so, if you look at it, what's the current temperature of the climate for, in terms of visas coming in? Are we accommodating or not accommodating right now?
I think in many ways, like I'm seeing green cards being issued faster. So I think this administration is doing that. But when it comes to corporate, I'm not seeing too much of a difference. I think more approvals without argument, but I think this is a little bit more linear of an administration. So that's good. But with the border problems we're having now, there's a new fee that's called the border program fee, and it's 300 or 600 depending on the size of the company, and that's on every case. So it
What does that
burdens
mean? What is it called?
the border program fee.
And what is
So
that?
I guess it's just used to help fund the border crisis, and but it's now put on the companies, you know what I mean? So that's one of the things that this administration, or at least was created under this administration, that we now have. So I have clients say, wait, I'm not in asylum. Like, why am I paying for an asylum fee? And I'm like, it's just a burden we all have to pay now, to assist USCIS, which is a fee-based agency, to process all the probably asylum applications at the border, and beyond. So, that can make things a little bit more difficult in terms of price. And then there's more people applying. So, the H-1B lottery selection rate, it seems like it's lower. So it's tough. And there's been layoffs this year, a lot of IT layoffs. You probably are familiar with that, but a lot of tech layoffs, and then AI may replace a lot of jobs. So I'm
There are
getting
a lot of layoffs. Are you hearing that, Sergio? I mean, from AI perspective, we're seeing about people getting hired, but there are a lot of layoffs right now.
layoffs across the board. Like I think I've been reading about Tesla, and I get a lot of calls where people say like, how can I apply for a green card by myself? Like, what are my options? Because I don't have my job anymore, and I'm out of status, and how long do I have? So those are, I
What
don't
How does
usually
that
have it.
work? What is the and we're not trying to give free legal advice here, but in your opinion, what are the rules? And so, if somebody does leave their status because they've got laid off, what options do they have to stay?
Typically, you're out of status the day that you're not working, whether you quit or you're terminated. But you do get a grace period. So of it now, I believe it's been extended to 60 days to find another job. So, if you don't, sometimes your option is just to leave. I never want people to stay beyond that grace period because that can accrue unlawful presence. And even if it's 1 or 2 or 3 days, when you try to come back, Customs Border Patrol can say, "Hey, like you overstayed."
Do they check?
They do. You have an entry and exit. It's documented. Sometimes for Canada and the islands, it's not perfect, but there's an automated system. You can go in, you can check your travel record and see all your entries and exits. Sometimes they miss them, but for the most part, they're accurate.
Got
So
it. And so, for advice for startups around the world that are looking at coming here, what would you say? What's the time frame from the time they can apply to these visas and the time frame they can expect to get one?
There's a lot of variables, getting me the documents, of course, that's hard for some people. They gotta go through accountants, whatever, the corporate docs, stuff like that. Also, visa wait times at the consular post, depending on where they are. I'm on a lot of attorney threads, and they're like, what are the times right now in Poland? Or what are the times right now here? Because it's not public knowledge. They don't say, unfortunately, like E2 wait times here are this as of today. So that's part of it. Of course, there's prep time, but I would say the quickest turnaround on like an E2, for example, or even an L for a new office, I would say probably 3 months. And
Mhm.
I'd say that could be up to a year. I'd say average about 6 months.
So, we're coming up to the top of the show. What are some closing thoughts you have in terms of and how you can help, right? How you can help these companies. Closing thoughts, and what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think closing thoughts, let me see. The most important thing is, awareness. I don't think people realize that there's talent, around the world, and there's a process of bringing that talent here. And I also don't think that people and companies realize that by bringing in that talent, a lot of their visas are tied to their employment. So most, of them. So then that means that, they can't just leave. They fall out of status. So then you almost get a more loyal worker, for better or worse. So that's something, that's important that people don't realize. Now it's so easy to just shut your computer and turn it in and quit. There's a lot of turnover. So, when you have a worker that has that or wants a green card through you can get those loyal workers. So there's a process. Don't be intimidated by it. To reach me, by email, sergio@sergiolaw.com. My website it's getting a facelift, but sergiolaw.com is the website. So you can look on there and do the little, click schedule. My Calendly will be there. Should be up hopefully in a couple days. So that's about it.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to with us today. We appreciate it. And thanks to all my audience for joining one more time. GSD Presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And I'll be back to you again soon with another exciting edition. Thanks, Sergio. We appreciate
Thanks
it.
for
Thank you.
having me.